Yo, what's up guys? Lost here. Welcome back to another video. Today's video we're going to be talking about why Arc 2 ultimately failed in Wizard101. Now, this is my personal opinion, guys. I'm extremely sorry if this hurts your feelings or anything. I personally, feel this way about the game. So if you feel differently, I totally get that. I'm not trying to attack your opinion or anything. I just do want to state mine, as I think it is pretty important to discuss, as someone who loves Wiz, as someone who wants to get people into the game. I'm a strong believer in the fact that Arc 1 and Arc 3 are the strongest parts of the game. Now, real quick before the video starts, I'd appreciate if you guys could drop a sub, because only a small percent of people are actually subscribed. If you guys could do me a favor and drop a sub real quick as this intro ends, I'd appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoy the content. Anyway, back to the video. I do believe, despite the heavy amount of hiccups in Arc 3, I do believe it's a pretty awesome, set of worlds. I do believe that there's some amazing characters that carry it a lot. Shout out to my NPC tier list video if you want to check that out. But personally, that's just how I view it. I do feel like Arc 2 really struggled the most. And there's a few reasons for that, and they mostly come in the form of worlds more than anything. Now, I do believe Arc 2 has some great story points, right? This is silly, guys, because I know this game's been out forever and you probably do know those spoilers, but, if you don't want a spoiler warning, if you haven't really played out the game and are interested in the story at all, obviously you want to watch this video. I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the story. Not much, but, enough to kind of spoil the game. So if you don't really want to hear that, up to you, man, honestly. Basically, Arc 2 picks up in Celestia. Now, in Celestia, we meet Morganth, who is basically someone we learn to be one of Ambrose's old favorite students. Now, Morgan followed a dark path and ended up becoming quite evil after learning, I believe it was shadow magic, or just basically just dark arts, if you want to put it simpler, and kind of got caught and expelled eventually for doing what she did. We get to learn all about this in Ghost Avalon, which is honestly one of the most interesting story points of the game. This also gets expanded upon in Chrysalis with the I'm trying to remember what it was called, but you guys, if you have played through Chrysalis, you know what I'm talking about. The part where you get to play as Morganth and kind of experience through her eyes what happened. Now, this is the first story, it's cool to see another story following a good person gone bad, kind of like how Malistaire was. And it works pretty well in more of a student form than anything. I think that's what they were kind of going for. But unfortunately, for us, I do feel like the only real strong part of Arc 2 is the story. The actual gameplay aspect was honestly one of the worst in the entire game. I feel like they absolutely nailed some of these story points that were very important with Morganth, as in, showing who she used to be, what made her become evil. They all made those baseline reasons for being a villain all very clear, and I believe the story points that were in Arc 2 were pretty strong for the most part throughout the entire story. Now, we're going to talk about the characters. The characters were not bad either. There was characters like Divim and Chrysalis, who was one of the most interesting and cool allies to have by your side. Some of the characters and, their personalities were followable in Zafaria. I liked a lot of the characters in Zafaria. I think it was a pretty decent storyline to follow, having to save people and stuff in order. Avalon had some amazing characters. King Artorias, great character. Lady of the Lake, pretty solid character. And a few of the knights you would meet as well. Azteca, by far the best characters in Arc 2. I believe a lot of the characters in Azteca were pretty relatable, and a lot of them actually ended up having some pretty interesting stories behind them, and honestly some beautiful designs, which is another topic. Chrysalis as well. Again, decent characters. I mean, you can't really have any problem with them. Like I said, Dive and Whiteheart from earlier. The biggest problem that just plagues Arc 2 is just some of the worst gameplay I've ever seen in an MMO. No offense, guys, here. I do believe that as a card game, standalone, of course, sometimes it's going to get repetitive. A card game MMO, you can't really expect that to be, the most fun gameplay to play for 12 hours straight sometimes. But it doesn't help when basically they tailored all mobs in Arc 2 to be basically just these massive, basic-ass mobs most of the time. Which, ironically, a lot of the time, they reuse a lot of models in Arc 2. A lot of them look like this, whenever it comes to, some of the worlds. I probably saw this model 80,000 times in the process of questing through Arc 2. Anyway, totally different topic. But what I was going to say is that the gameplay in Arc 2 really, really struggled. And in the main way it struggled, for me personally, was just the repetition. And I feel like the fact that every single boss I fought against was a feint, blade, and maybe another feint or blade, and then a 7-pip AoE. As common as that is throughout the game, of course you do it in later worlds, but it was to the extent where it was OD. There was too many fights with too high of health every single time without fail. Having to fight bosses with 17k HP regularly, especially as a solo wizard throughout the game, and especially, oh my god, if you're a balanced wizard, it is dreadful. And I do feel like it is extremely overdone. And they really did nail in the point of repetition and the MMO grindy feel of it. And while some people don't mind that, it's so much better in the later worlds where they focus more on, protecting yourself, taking a lot of damage, however, being able to kill the opponents, which in times that don't take 12 years. Later in the worlds, Polaris kind of oversimplified it, made it a little bit too easy, I will say. But in the other worlds, like Imperia, for example, they focus more on sometimes cheats as well as base damage and base pierce in order to kill you quicker, instead of having 20-minute long boss fights in some cases, where you basically sit through a million different animations of hits that don't even do that much damage to you because you have Waterworks gear on, which gives you like 40 resist, but if you have Proof and Defy with it. So while you won't die that much in these arcs, especially if you have reshuffle or even heals to help you, maintain your hits as well as stay alive, pretty much never die in these worlds very often, unless, you play against a storm boss with like 3 fire minions that spam stun you or something, or spam E-free you or something dumb. That really doesn't really happen that often, especially in the earlier worlds. The really only problem about dying comes to a Chrysalis sometimes, and that's only before Darkmoor. But I really do feel like the quest tree and gameplay and overall just the worlds, especially Azteca and Chrysalis, need extreme reworks in Arc 2. They just need reworked really badly. Now, I will say Avalon is a great world. Avalon is honestly one of my favorites. I feel like it's paced pretty well. I do feel like there's enough quests for it not to be repetitive. It has a great storyline. Overall aesthetic is pretty cool. And there's some cool bosses with good backstories. However, stale worlds in terms of gameplay like Safaria, while being short, aren't great. It's kind of just a worse version of Celestia in my opinion. There's worlds like I mentioned earlier, like Azteca and Chrysalis, which have literally upwards of 200 plus quests, 183 I believe in Azteca. I remember that word. I'm not kidding, I'm not reading that off anything. I literally remember that number because of how many times I've been through Azteca and how many times I've wanted to literally throw my keyboard across the room. And then I think a Chrysalis is a grueling 272 if I'm not wrong, which is actually dreadful. And again, I'm reading this off memory. I'm gonna put them on screen during editing, and if I find out I was right about both of them, wow. Just that kind of just shows how much you'd have to just bullet stare down the quest tree, saying basically, when is this gonna be over, man? Because I do feel like the worlds are, sometimes the difficulty isn't the problem, it's the repetition, the extreme amount of boss fights, it's the overcompensation, and I would call it padding of gameplay more than it is actual content. There's times where I fight mobs that are the same exact design over 10 to 20 times in the same world, and that's common with Azteca and Chrysalis, unfortunately. Despite some of these worlds having beautiful designs, mainly Azteca, it still, drags and drags and drags. And to see exactly what I mean, I highly recommend a video called I Recommend This Video by Zerit, where he plays through Azteca and basically wants to cry the entire time. And it basically perfectly describes how it felt to play through Azteca on any world, especially solo questing. This is honestly why I think it really desperately needs a rework, guys. I think they nailed the story. I think people hate a little bit too much on Malastare the Undying. I really don't think it was that bad of a story decision. I think it was kind of cool because they gave him another proper conclusion that he needed. And it honestly created a lot of epicness to the final fight you have in Azteca, where when you fight against Malastare the Undying, saying something along the lines, honestly, I'd rather just play the clip. It's fucking dope.
Young wizard, I had nearly forgotten how much I despise you. Now that I lay eyes upon you again, my fury is a black hole of rage, swallowing the light of 1,000 dying suns.
But yeah, man, overall, I do feel like Azteca and Chrysalis have some of the most lacking gameplay in all of the worlds. Now, don't take just my word for it. I believe almost every single person you will come across will agree with me on this. As much as you want to defend the story to the end, guys, you can't defend the fact that the world has terrible gameplay, and that, honestly, it really needs some more work. In terms of polishing and overall experience, man. Overall, guys, thank you guys so much for coming to watch this video. For Max Wizards, I have 2 Exalts, well, almost 2 Exalts. My Myth is almost done with Chrysalis. My Myth just started Chrysalis a while ago. So, you know, I have quested quite a bit. I can tell you how it is in terms of my experiences questing through these worlds. And I've held these feelings as well as known plenty of people who have since I was probably first beating Azteca, first beating Chrysalis. They're great worlds in the first run most of the time, in terms of story if you're paying attention, but in terms of length and gameplay, they really just lack. Thank you guys so much for coming to today's video. I appreciate you guys always watching. Thank you guys so much for supporting, and yeah.
Bye.